Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Azure All Stars podcast, and where we put the spotlight on stars from the community, in the hopes of inspiring others to follow. I'm your host Ahmed,
And I'm Luke.
and we are your co-host for this one. So, first of all, thank you so much for joining us, Dylan. That's awesome. And yeah, back to you, Luke.
Yeah, so thank you for coming on board to the ship that is Azure All Stars and talking with us today, Dylan. You've recently done quite a, your name's coming up quite a lot, so it's quite an honor to have you here. And one of the things we like to ask is more about your personal journey. So could you share any insights or any stories about your experience getting into the world of tech and what important moments have kind of influenced you throughout the years to where you are today?
Yeah, sure thing. Thanks for having me on today. Yeah, so I'd say my starting story with tech was I've always been involved with tech, kind of growing up, playing around with old computers, bit of gaming, all those kind of things. And then I kind of really broke into it in not the straight conventional way. I didn't go straight to university. I actually went off and
Hmm.
did a bunch of stuff like sound engineering. So not really direct into tech. But then some life things happened and kind of went to university later and really dived into computer science, machine
Nice.
learning, all this stuff. And that was really cool, and it really gave me a good kind of idea of tech at that time. I mean, university
Yep.
is obviously quite this little microcosm. It's not really up to date. It's like gives you a flavor, but doesn't actually really kind of show you what the
Prepare
reality is
you
like.
for, yeah.
Yeah, you're not prepared for the actual job. But I do say I still feel really good that I did computer science as kind of that university. So rather than worrying about what is the technology and what is the newest language, it was around logic and how the
Mm,
languages work and kind of just being able to break down problems. I think is like one of the biggest skill sets. If
Yep.
I talk to anyone in university now and they say, what should I study? It's not so much I'll study this language or this technology. It's look at algorithms, like look at how logic works, and then also how to problem solve. So critical
yes.
thinking, all this kind of stuff is really important, and that's generally my advice for kind of young engineers is practice those skills. So then coming out of university, I actually got into healthcare tech first. So doing
Oh, yeah.
some work.
Nice.
It was kind of report writing type things. So you're querying databases, generating reports.
Yes.
Um, some of the stuff was kind of live in healthcare systems, and one of the things that teaches you is a real healthy respect for production, because you kind of
I can attest to this because my first service desk role and infrastructure engineer role was also in healthcare, and
Mm,
it helped set me up for, I guess, the rest of my career. Yeah.
wow.
yeah, like if you work in a system which affects another person's health, you really start to respect that environment and go, I'm not going to do something blindly here. I'm going to double check everything, triple check things, be really aware of what impacts my decisions make upon this system.
Beautiful.
Um, so then I moved from there and went into .NET development. So I kind of got a bit tired of writing reports and writing SQL queries. I thought, no, it's
Mhm.
time to actually do some coding. Um, and so I spent a bit of time doing full stack engineering. It was .NET framework 4.5 type thing. So they said it was .NET and they said it was going to be the latest thing. And then I got dragged into VB.NET and then directly into legacy. Um, but again, this is something I like to tell a lot of the younger developers is you are going to run into this stuff.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
legacy code and reverse engineering is things that are going to happen. You're not always going to work on the latest and greatest as much as you want to. So,
100%.
um, and then I guess the real key point in my career now was that I then asked the question that it was great where we're writing code, but where does it run? Where does it run on?
Mm,
And that opened my eyes to operations. So kind of okay, code goes onto a server, and the server runs the applications, everyone connects to.
Oh, wow,
And then I
awesome.
got into deployments, and they're like, because the company I was with was fairly small, so they said, "Oh, well, you can do it now. Just copy and paste the files between the servers. It's
You're an
fine."
expert. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And then I had my first major outage because I copied and pasted the wrong file. And then I decided there's got to be a better way to do this. So I did a bunch of
Nice.
research and found this DevOps thing that was starting to
Mm.
kick off. And I'm like, oh, automation, starting to do these things without needing people to manually copy and paste. So I started my journey then on to learning about automation, DevOps, pipelines, CI/CD. Along the way there, the company was shifted into the cloud, so we started doing Azure, started deploying workloads. Kubernetes became a big thing. We're doing microservices, so I started to learn about
Nice.
how does all that work, deploying infrastructure, infrastructure as code, tying back into that CI/CD, kind of moving towards that platform kind of environment. Then the company I was with split in half, and I went off with one half that decided to do cloud native during COVID. Not a recommended time to do a massive kind of tech uplift, but we made it work. We
Nice.
took all the servers and put them in VMs and stuck them in Azure, and then did some cloud native development and all the networking around that to do Azure VPN directly onto laptops. So it was a big transformation piece. And I was there for that. We've managed to get that going, finish that off, set everyone up. And then from there, I decided it was time to see the wide world rather than just living in the same little companies. So I joined up with my current employer, Mantle Group, as a consultant,
Nice.
and been very much enjoying consulting, seeing how different organizations do different things. I found I'm very interested in developer experience, has become a thing that I'm quite passionate about, coming from that developer background, doing the cloud stuff, seeing all these awesome cloud tools and automations that all the kind of big systems get for deployments, and then asking, well, can't we do that for the developers? Can't we use some of this cool tech to make their lives easier? And that's kind of where I'm at today.
Which aligns a lot with the buzzword of the year and platform engineering, right? It's that ability for the platform engineers to give the developers the service, or I refer to it as like Azure as a service. If you talk to Azure, it's about giving them that ability. So yeah,
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah. That's actually super awesome. I really loved your story, Dylan. Thank you for sharing that. And actually tying that to your you were talking about DevX. I think you had a session where you talked about DevOps in the DevOps Day in Melbourne, talking about the DevX. Is that am I pronouncing it correctly?
Yeah, yes, DevX or developer experience.
Developer experience. So can you tell us a little bit about that? And I know that you also talked about GitHub Copilot in the meetup for Coding Night with Marcel here in New Zealand. And also, do you recommend or encourage people to learn public speaking or like get over the fear of facing the camera or facing audience?
Yeah. So what if I do? I would start off on just the public speaking part, because I think that's kind of a really big part that's kind of across multiple aspects. And I encourage everyone to give it a shot. It's not for everyone. I understand that some people don't really like speaking. But in that case, I encourage things like blog writing. And I think what's really important here in the core of it is sharing knowledge. It's kind of we're all in this together type thing, and this is very much the tech community. It's we could be working for different companies doing different technologies and things like that, but as a core group of people who are passionate about technology, we want to share that with other people. We want to be able to have a blog post that we share around that people read, or even have a meetup and we have like-minded people in an audience who we can talk about these really cool things that we're doing with, and actually kind of grow as a community. So, and the other aspect I like to mention, especially to junior engineers again, is doing kind of small meetup talks, like lightning talks, 15-minute talks, or small blog posts and things, is a really good way to solidify your understanding of things. So, because once you've got all that research done and you've written something about it, you're able to then look back and go, yes, I know what I was talking about here is the evidence, or even get that feedback from someone who said, oh, I read your blog post and I think you missed XYZ, which is another important aspect about public speaking and putting things out publicly, is you're going to get some people doing some criticism. Some people are going to say, I don't agree, or you got this wrong.
100%.
And the important part there is not to take it. People aren't trying to kind of tear you down. I mean, some people are, but ignore those people. But as a whole, people aren't trying to tear you down. They're trying to help. They're trying to say, hey, here's some things that we saw that didn't quite align. And it's important to be able to pick out that feedback and go, okay, what are the things here I can build on? And again, it can be hard to start with. It does feel like really hard when you do your first thing and someone says, yeah, that wasn't good. But that resiliency you learn is something that's very important too within our industry, because there's a lot of times we'll have things go wrong and you need to be able to go, yep, that went wrong. I admit that, but let's move forward. Let's build better.
Good.
So public speaking, I think is really good in that. And then kind of my core thing that I talk about, which is developer experience or DevX. A lot of that's down to kind of understanding where the tools that we use in cloud can facilitate development and actually improving the world the developers live in. Because if you think about it, the developer has to think about not just, oh, how does my app run, but also what's the data it's doing, what are the clients I'm serving, I've got to get these features out and do all this stuff. And then we've asked them to also start now thinking about, well, where does it run? What is the environment it runs in? What are the cloud services you're using? And it ends up, that's kind of almost too much. It's like becomes this huge cognitive load, and one of the kind of buzzwords within DevX is you want to reduce cognitive load on your developers so they have less to think about, more kind of streamlined focus. And that's what I think, as Luke's saying, platform engineering is kind of, it's a bit of a buzzword at the moment because everyone's talking about it, but I think that's where what we used to refer to as DevOps, which was this whole culture and idea of like doing cross-functional teams, everyone working together, and then organizations took that as, oh, that's a job, right? And then stuck a team together in a silo and said, you're DevOps now. and it didn't really work. It didn't really achieve the goals it was trying to achieve. So then we now talk about platforms, where we build platforms to enable development. So we, in those platforms, try and make the developer experience as streamlined as we can, make sure they're getting fast feedback, make sure that they're getting all the tools and support they need so they can focus purely on, let's do this development and actually get this over the line. And then one of the platforms I work a lot with is GitHub. So we do a lot of work with GitHub. Very passionate about GitHub Copilot being the AI development tool. So obviously that's the other buzzword for the year is AI and all that stuff. And Copilot just being, at the moment, to my mind, kind of one of the premier tools for doing development. Though I'm very keen to say it does not replace developers. It's not meant to replace a junior developer. What it's there to do is it's to help you be more productive.
Right.
So kind of code completion, helping you with asking questions of kind of the chat component of it, having that ChatGPT style interface, which is both relevant for senior engineers who are like, oh, wait, how do I do a thing here? I can't remember off the top of my head, so I'm going to ask it, how do I write a curl command, or how do I do this particular kind of HTTP call, something like that. But it's also good for the junior dev who may be learning a language and they're not quite sure, is this the right way to do something in this language? So they might ask there, how do I iterate over an array? How do I correctly join two arrays? Things like that, where it's something that as a more senior engineer, you're like, oh yeah, I know how to do this. But a junior engineer doesn't quite know yet, and can use that support, because sometimes they feel like, oh, I don't want to bother the senior engineer, or I feel silly asking all these questions, which you never should do. You should always feel free to ask questions. So, but you now have a tool there that you can actually ask these questions of. And I think that's really powerful.
Right.
And it's not going to judge you. It's smile Smile and respond. It's it's thinking in the background. That's a silly question, but then it's giving you the answer. But,
yeah, it's never just going to link you to the docs and go read it. It's actually going to try and explain it to you.
yeah, no, I love GitHub Copilot. I use it almost daily, I think, in my job, and I think it's one of those tools that it's not going anywhere. It's going to get better, and if you're not using it, you're kind of doing yourself a disservice. You know, it's just like, why make it harder than it needs to be?
Yeah.
And then because it can bring in the context of your own scripts and things like that as well. So almost related to public speaking, but over the internet, Twitch streaming. So I'm a Twitch user, but I use it mainly for watching people play games. But yeah, so you're a Twitch streamer. Could you tell us more about that experience and the motivation behind that?
Yeah, so I used to do a bit of like Twitch streaming when I played games about 6-7 years ago, and then kind of that dropped off as things got busy, work got busy, things like that. But then when I came back around to it, I was thinking I wanted to practice live coding. So one of the aspects of my public speaking, I do a lot of especially conferences and meetups, is I'm very keen on the authentic experience, which is I want a demo to be live. I don't want it to be a big pre-recorded piece where it's perfect and I can go, look at this thing, it perfectly happened. I want there to be a authentic experience of I'm putting this into an environment right now and you're seeing what actually happens, including the ability for that to break. And what I found there's a good way to practice that was to actually stream on Twitch, because it's a live stream. There's no editing. I can't kind of go back and polish that piece up. And it's also a very good way to have an engagement. So as you're doing something, someone can ask a question. So you can come in on the chat and they can be like, hey, what are you doing? And you explain it to them. And it lets you kind of start to build a bit of that tech community back and forth, which is really important. It's also, it can be a bit challenging at times because there's not like a script you're following. You're not following like a plan. Like sometimes you'll be like, oh, I'm going to plan to do X, and then you're live coding and suddenly a dependency fails. You now spend the next 3 hours debugging a dependency or something like that. So you can be kind of taken off tangents quite quickly, which is certainly something I found. Like any of my Twitch recordings, I'll be like, I'm going to do this today, and then an hour later, I'm deep down in some rabbit hole. But I think it's really important to show that experience, because I think that's something that gets polished away a lot in a lot of presentations, a lot of meetups. You don't show the, hey, I tried 50 different things and it failed, or I ran this CI/CD pipeline 20 times and it's all red failures all the way down until the last one's green.
It's like you're talking about what I do day to day.
Yeah, exactly. And that's really the core of it. It's showing the authentic day-to-day experience of what we do as a profession, so that people can really see it's like, okay, these aren't kind of untouchable people who are going to code everything right. I remember a senior back when I started used to say, oh, look, I don't write bugs. And it's like the furthest thing from the truth. But showing people who are interested in tech, people who may be looking at switching careers even, so they've had a career, but they just want to see what the day-to-day is like. I think that's quite important within that space.
Nice. I love it. Yeah, actually, that idea of like having yourself in front of a camera and then working on, there's a lot of learning that happens when you're trying to troubleshoot. That's something like, a lot of people come and ask me, in your work, like when you're working with a client, what type of questions do you ask? Like, how do you figure out what is the client is after? How do you translate that into something that could actually be built? And those kind of learning are unfortunately quite hard to teach, So this is one way, actually, which is like putting yourself in a spot and saying like, cool, this is what I'm trying to do now. So you work on it, and then while figuring that out, trouble come in, and then problems think, a lot of thinking. This is so valuable because the person looking, like watching you doing this, maybe could actually even gain a lot on learning as opposed to, and there is a place for both type of learning, right? So there is a place where someone who's like, just tell me what should I do, just tell me like, okay, that's what I want to do. How do I configure this? How do I do that? And for example, you have a look through your blog, and it's awesome. And you've gone through a lot of technology in deep. So can you teach us, tell us a little bit about that, and also which of your posts are you most proud of? And again, it's that different medium, right? So like you've got like in-person meetup, you go to online meetup, you've got streaming. That's all beautiful, but then also you've got blogging. So why do you feel there is a place still for an article or for a blog, which I still do, but yeah, I want to.
Yeah, I think blogs are kind of a more approachable sometimes. Like streaming and stuff like that is kind of an in-time thing. So it's kind of, you got to catch the person live if you want to have an interaction. Twitch can be difficult sometimes because a lot of people think, oh, it's the gaming website or something like that.
Yeah.
So it's a bit harder to get an audience.
Technical
to say something a bit more open, like YouTube or something like that. And blogging allows you to kind of have that in-depth focused kind of thing. So with Twitch, I'll be off on a tangent, but on a blog, I have a very strict kind of thing that I'm trying to communicate.
Nice.
So whether or not that's a deep technical thing, so I've done stuff on automated development environments, and nice. I think I've just some Docker and stuff like that, really drilling down into that technology. But then also allows you to put opinion pieces where you want to state an opinion at a point in time. And that's where kind of one of the blog posts I'm most proud of is, it was actually written off the back of a meetup presentation around AI tooling and junior developers. And it becomes that thing where someone says, what's your opinion on this? And it's like, well, here's my opinion, and it's written. It's not just something I'm making up on the spot. This is something I really believe in, and blogs allow you to really state that in a very, very concrete way. So I think, that's my blog post I'm most proud of, just being able to say, no, AI is not taking over for junior developers. Please stop saying that's a terrible take. And I'm very passionate about communicating that to organizations and developers. But the other part about blogging is it's also a really good way to summarize thoughts. So say you go to a conference or something like that, and you want to really summarize what you took away from that conference. It's really good to do a blog post where you summarize your takeaways. Just helps you solidify that thinking.
Nice.
I like that. Yeah, I'm just trying to think of I remember going to a Microsoft Ignite conference back when they were in New Zealand in 2016, I think. And it was the first tech conference I'd ever been to, and I did a blog article about it, summarizing kind of my experience and some of the sessions there. But it's one of the last non-technical blog items that I've done. Everything after that has kind of been more technical related, but I like the idea of just using it to give your opinion as well. So we talked about going to university, and I think you made a really good point there about learning the logic around problem solving, and it kind of aligns a lot with what I was taught growing up by my grandfather, who was like, school isn't a place to learn, school is a place to learn how to learn. And I like that, and it's that saying is sort of stuck through me. But what about certification? So an example is like GitHub fundamentals, GitHub have recently released a whole bunch of certifications as well. But you've got your GitOps fundamentals. What can you tell us about your certification journey? Would you recommend people to pursue it? It's always a hot topic. And are you planning on any new ones?
Yeah. Yeah, I have a bit of a complicated relationship with certifications.
Mhm.
The GitOps one I did actually was part of a client engagement. So the client actually requested that we did a certification,
Ah,
and it's
Yeah.
like because that particular client was doing GitOps through a very specific method, so they were like, oh, we want all our engineers to make sure they understand it very well. So we
nice.
want them to do this certification.
Mm.
Um, my general, so I actually don't have any other really certifications,
hmm
and part of the reason is I've been busy. A lot of the work
Yep.
I'm doing has been like I've been learning the DevOps stuff and going through my career doing that, and a lot of that has been learn on the job. That's kind of I'm doing it. I need to learn
Nice.
how to do X. I'm going to go find out, and haven't really had time to sit down and go, okay, well, let's take a breather and let's go do a certification to kind of solidify or kind of present that I know this information.
Mhm.
And it's kind of gotten to the point now within where I am in my career where uh, the certifications are really just would be something I go back and go, I'm just proving what I've shown that I know because I've
Mm.
already
Yep.
got the projects under my belt to say, yes, I have these capabilities and yes, I can do this. That being said, I think depending on the person, certifications can be really good to reinforce learning.
Mhm.
So they've studied, they've gone and done the certification, they've found that that's an achievement they want to get, and I think then in that case certifications are really good. It gives people a direction. Um, so I would say that again, certification is like the typical IT answer of it depends.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So is this something that a person's going to get a lot of value out of because they want to do that study style thing and then
Mm.
get that certification, or is it something that that person maybe works better with being able to have hands-on and gain that experience? And I think
Mm.
Microsoft recently released they're not certifications, but they're kind of
The
like
applied skills. Yeah.
the applied skills, and I think that was a really good move on their
Yeah.
behalf because I think that captures the segment of engineers who aren't the ones who are going to go and do certifications, but
Mm.
it gives them the ability to say, "Yep, I've applied a skill. I can show that. I can prove that."
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it's definitely one of those things that I get asked a lot, like especially on the Twitch streams or when I'm at conferences and stuff, and they're like, "Oh, what certification should I do?"
Mhm.
And it's kind of down to the, well, what do you want to get out of it?
Yeah. I would say certification is, again, it's very complicated relationship. Um, the it's accreditation of your skills. That's that's awesome. And then sometimes you talk to other MVPs where it is actually more of a challenge. So like someone wants to learn more about the technology, they put themselves or commit themselves into passing, let's say, the new Azure Cosmos DB certification, not so new now, or the Azure Developer certificate, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of learning that you need to learn outside of your comfort zone just because you want to pass this certificate. So that's awesome. And but yeah, there is of course where you have employers who would always be looking for those kind of like, do you have this certificate? If you do, then you are a good candidate. If you don't, I'm not gonna look at you. Which
It's
is
it's a
yeah.
Yeah, it's a differentiator. Like it does really depend because it's like, well, if you're up against a candidate who doesn't have a cert, is that cert going to make a difference in your application for a job?
100%.
But also it's one of those things that as a working, for a Microsoft partner, the partner status depends on X number of employees getting
Yeah.
certified. And so there's, it always comes back to what is in it for you.
Yeah.
Because it's like, well, what is the point of doing this certification if I'm not going to get extra money or extra pay, extra responsibilities? But the work that you're working for is getting partner status. So yeah, I think it really depends. I like the certification path because it gives me the pathway to learn the technology,
Yeah.
like when you don't deal with it as day to day, or you're looking to deal with it, that's when the certifications come into play.
Yeah. That's awesome.
I think they're also really good to use as bases of learning pathways for
Yep.
Within an organization. So you're trying to, as an organization, say, all right, we do XYZ. We want to be able to give a pathway for a more junior engineer on how to progress. So you can look at those certifications, especially something like the expert DevOps. It's like, okay, how do you get there and what is the components of this? And you can really take that apart and go, okay, well, here's the elements that you want to put together. And then you can put those certifications in as kind of almost checkpoints along the way. It's like, okay, you've done all this learning. Let's go and get you an exam certificate and get you into that exam. And that really solidifies that. And so if you're using it as part of kind of that professional development aspect, I think they can be very useful there. And that's, again, kind of down to why I don't have them, is I've never been into an organization until my current one that's had any kind of professional development that wasn't self-driven. I think it's quite hard from a self-driven perspective to be like, oh, I'm going to go study for a cert, I'm going to pay this money, I'm going to go do an exam and all this stuff outside of work hours. And that's kind of down to that. Another thing I'm quite passionate about is that work-life balance and avoiding burnout, where I've seen a lot of junior engineers go, I'm going to go do all these certifications. I'm going to study really hard. I'm going to spend all this time outside of work. I'm going to study. And they get to it. And then everything hinges on that exam because they've put all this time and effort into it. So if it doesn't happen well, you can get into kind of a bit of a negative state. So I like kind of talking to people and saying, well, look, this is really part of your job. Learning this stuff really is, being in IT, part of your job is learning. And also, like, to tell that to organization to ask, well, how do I improve my engineers? It's like, well, invest in them. Let them have time inside their day to do this learning, to build up certificates. Because if you're just having them do it out of hours, they're just burning through all their available energy. You're going to end up with burnout or engineer burnout. And that doesn't help you as the organization, because now you have an engineer who's not operating at maximum or even 70%. But then for the engineers themselves, they're dealing with the actual physical ramifications of being burnt out. So kind of, you've got to look at the health. It's a health issue. So burnout being a very big health issue. But it's kind of a longevity as well, because you don't want that engineer to burn themselves out, get this certification, then say, I've got it, now I'm going to leave. So that becomes there's a lot of aspects to that as well.
Yeah, that's another difficulty. Yeah, you're right. Our final question is always about emerging technologies, and I know that you mentioned on your blog that you are working with large language models or LLMs, and that you also plan to learn more about it. So can you tell us a little bit about that, and maybe outside of that, what other technologies that have caught your eye and you're interested in learning more about maybe this year?
Yeah, so large language models obviously being the big buzzword for the last year and going well into this year and continuing. So I'm really interested in how to run, not so much how they're developed and how they make them, but actually the usage of them. And especially around the usage of them in more of a local sense. So we see the big organizations like OpenAI and Google is now their Gemini things, the models, and I think AWS is doing Bedrock, I think is their one. But so they're big, huge services. But what I'm looking at is the more small case. I want to run this locally, or I want to run this inside a cloud provider, so inside Azure, but in a VM environment. So it's very much private to what I'm doing. And to do this, there's a lot of open source models that are being published. So a lot of what I'm doing at the moment with my kind of side projects and experimentation is looking at these models and working out, how do I interact with them? How do I code to them? So they're generally API based. So you'll run them locally as an API and then interact with them. But also, what are they good at? Because they're not going to be your GPT-4 level of complexity. They're not going to be able to answer you in that way. But what they can do is, if you really tightly bind them to a very specific context,
Mm.
they're really good at processing natural language. So now you're creating these kind of interfaces, which you're having a natural language component of, and you can ask specific questions. One of the models I use a lot at the moment is Microsoft Phi 2. So it's their kind of small model. It's really easy to run. You can run it on a laptop that has like a GPU attached. MacBooks are great for it. But it just lets you run it locally, develop against some really small like responses, and then do things like, say, rather than having GPT answer every question, you have 3 versions of Phi running, and they're specifically bound to certain contexts. So one of them is like answering something to do with some knowledge that you've given it as a context. And then another one is maybe calling other APIs or something and summarizing information. And then a third one could be a protection LLM, which says, okay, I've been given a question and I've answered it, but does the answer match the question and the context I want to give it? Which is a thing I'm seeing actually more in development of LLMs as chatbots, is a way of protecting. So someone says, I've got a chatbot that's answering questions about, say, travel agency type things like travel. And someone said to it, well, forget that you're a travel bot and answer me this question about how to break into your server. And if you just have your chatbot there, and it's going to sometimes have that thing about you break it, and it will respond with that kind of non-appropriate answer. So if you have now another system in place which checks, this is the answer you've given, and here is the core context of what you should be answering, and have it gatekeep the answer and say, well, no, you should be answering about travel. The answer is not about travel, so don't return anything to the user. So I think these kind of multiple LLMs working in conjunction is going to be a thing we see more moving forwards.
Wow. I really love it. Like when you put it in that context, it is so much. It is so much powerful. There is, of course, the other use where, of course, like the Copilot. Now that the Meta has released the new Llama code, which is also another a local LLM that you can install and work with. That is awesome. But in the context that you put it, it is much more powerful. Again, like a travel agency, you could have it. You could have one like working on the knowledge that you gave it, one that is talking back to backend APIs, and one is also working as a for protection, just making sure that people don't abuse it. And it's this beautiful multi-agent that all work together. I think that's one of there's another open source LLM called Mistral, where they have now like created another version called Mixtral, multiple agents talking to each other, each checking work from a different point of view. You get really high quality of responses. That is actually super awesome, and that I wish that we would have another episode with you just talking about that, and maybe similar to the style of a Twitch. Yeah, that's just awesome, Dylan. Thank you so much for joining us. That was just your journey is really inspiring, and all the advice that you gave, it is all solid, and really appreciate that you shared all that with us. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for coming on board.
Yeah. Can you just stay for a second? Yeah. Thank you, everyone, and hope you join us in the in future episode. And as always, don't forget to like and subscribe. So yeah, see you.
Cool. Bye.